Free software. Free software, software libre, is software that can be used, studied, and modified without restriction, and which can be copied and redistributed in modified or unmodified form, either without restriction or with minimal restrictions, only to ensure that further recipients can also do these things, and that manufacturers of consumer-facing hardware allow user modifications to their hardware. Free software is generally available without charge but can have a fee. The free software movement was conceived in 1983 by Richard Stallman to satisfy the need for and to give the benefit of software freedom to computer users. Stallman founded the Free Software Foundation in 1985 to provide the organizational structure to advance his free software ideas. Richard Stallman states that software is free software if people who receive a copy of the software have the following four freedoms. Freedom 0, the freedom to run the program for any purpose. Freedom 1, the freedom to study how the program works and change it to make it do what you wish. Freedom 2, the freedom to redistribute copies so you can help your neighbor. Freedom 3, the freedom to improve the program and release your improvements and modified versions in general to the public so that the whole community benefits. Freedom 1 and 3 require source code to be available because studying and modifying software without its source code is highly impractical. Thus, free software means that computer users have the freedom to cooperate with whom they choose and to control the software they use. Linux kernel is an example. A software license is a legal instrument governing the usage or redistribution of software. All software is copyright protected, irrespective of whether it is in the public domain. Contractual confidentiality is another way of protecting software. A typical software license grants an end user permission to use one or more copies of software in ways where such a use would otherwise constitute copyright infringement of the software owner's exclusive rights under copyright law. Some software comes with a license when purchased off the shelf or an OEM license when bundled with hardware, original equipment manufacturer license. A free or open source license makes software free for inspection of its code, modification of its code, and distribution. While software released with such a license, like the GNU General Public License, can be sold for money, the distribution cannot be restricted in the same ways as software with copyright and patent restrictions used by firms to require licensing fees. Free and open source software is software that is liberally licensed to grant the right of users to use, study, change, and improve its design through the availability of its source code. This approach has gained both momentum and acceptance as the potential benefits have been increasingly recognized by both individuals and corporate players. Newcomers to the subject can be confused by the term free. In the context of free and open source software, free is intended to refer to the freedom to copy and reuse the software rather than to price of the software. free software licenses and open source licenses are used by many software packages. Some of the most popular licenses: the GNU General Public License, the GNU Lesser General Public License, the BSc license, the Mozilla Public License, the MIT license, and the Apache license. Linux. Linux is a generic term referring to Unix-like computer operating systems based on the Linux kernel. Their development is one of the most prominent examples of free and open source software collaboration. Typically, all the underlying source code can be used, freely modified, and redistributed, both commercially and non-commercially, by anyone under licenses such as GNU General Public License. The name Linux comes from the Linux kernel, originally written in 1991 by Linus Torvald. Linux can be installed on a wide variety of computer hardware, ranging from embedded devices such as mobile phones, smartphones, and wristwatches to mainframe and supercomputers. Linus Torvald invented Linux itself. In 1991, Torvald was a student at the University of Helsinki in Finland, where he had been using Unix, a non-free Unix-like system, and began writing his own kernel. He started by developing device drivers and hard drive access, and by September had a basic design that he called version 0.01. This kernel, which is called Linux, was afterwards combined with the GNU system to produce a complete free operating system. Linux distributions. A Linux distribution is a member of the family of Unix-like software distributions built on top of the Linux kernel. Such distributions consist of a large collection of software applications such as word processors, spreadsheets, media players, and database applications. The operating system will consist of the Linux kernel and usually a set of libraries and utilities from the GNU project, with graphics support from the Windows system. Because most of the kernel and supporting packages are some combination of free software and open source, Linux distributions have taken a wide variety of forms, from fully featured desktop and server operating systems to minimal environments. Popular Linux distributions. CentOS, a distribution derived from the same sources used by Red Hat, maintained by a dedicated volunteer community of developers with both 100% Red Hat compatible versions and an upgraded version that is not always 100% upstream compatible. Debian, a non-commercial distribution maintained by a volunteer developer community with a strong commitment to free software principles. Fedora, a community distribution sponsored by Red Hat. Gentoo, a distribution targeted at power users, known for its free BSD, ports like automated system for compiling applications from source code. Knoppix, the first live CD distribution to run completely from removable media without installation to a hard disk, derived from Debian. Ubuntu, a popular desktop distribution derived from Debian, maintained by Canonical.